Hello and welcome. So this is the help session for assignment 3. Now, before we start, you'll see that there should be a chat window on the right-hand side of the stream. First things first, just let me know if you can hear me and just say hi so I know you're here. So I'll just give you a minute to do that. There should be about 5 people here so far. So if you can hear me, just say hi or something, or you can hear me. Adjust the volume if you need also. So just put something into the chat and we'll get started. So if you're just joining, just put something into the chat just to make sure that I know you can hear me. Cool. Okay, so you definitely can hear me. All right, cool. All right, so let me just move some stuff around. Start looking through this and get through the assignment. All right, now what we've got here is we went through the basics in the labs of the structure of this program. One thing that we really need to understand about the structure of this is that we sorry. And it's not working. Give me a second here. Get this to work. Great. That's working. All right. There we go. I don't know what happened there. All right. So the first things first is we need to understand the structure of this. And this is really important for this assignment and for the next assignment because we're going to use a different structure in the next one. And so if you can understand the difference between the two structures, it'll really help. So at the very top, we have this cricket match. And inside of that, we have 3 object references. And they're called Team 1, Team 2, Team 3. And they will either have a memory address in them or they'll be null, meaning that there is no team. If they do have an object, if they do have an address or an object reference in them, then they will indicate the location of our teams. So I'm just going to draw it like this instead of writing a memory address. Okay, so here we have 3 teams. Now in each of those teams, we also have a object reference, and that object reference is called player. And because we're inside of this team, we don't need to call this player 3 because I'm inside this, I know it refers to this player. So each player is called player, and we know which player it is because we're inside of the team. So there's no ambiguity between which player I'm talking about. If I say the player from team 1, I'm talking about this player. If I say the player from team 3, I'm talking about this one. I don't need to give it a different name, and in reality, I can't give it a different name because that's an attribute. Okay. Now, these can all be null or they can be a particular player. So if there's a player, then we have a player. So these blue ones here are all team, and these black ones down the bottom are all player. So these indicate the classes that they're in. The player with the lowercase is the attribute or object reference. The lowercase here is the object reference of a team. Team is the class here, and we've got cricket match. Now, there's going to be other data inside of there, such as the team name and the player name and all that kind of stuff. And that's where our UML diagrams come in handy. Okay. But this is the way we want to view it. Now, why is it important viewing it this way? So what we saw in the lab is we only looked at the teams so far. The players are a little bit more difficult because we don't have direct access to them from the cricket match. So it means that if you're in the cricket match, I can't go directly and grab this player. Okay? I have to go through the team and then the player. And it goes back to what we said just before, where I say, I need the player from team 1. I need the player from team 2. I need the player from team 3. I can't go directly to the player. Now, you could make this structure different if you were going to design it differently in some alternative design that you might want to do, where you do have the players up here in cricket match, and then you just have other object references up here. But that's not what we want. We want the abstraction so that team only has the player. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of because of this. We can only look down, okay? So when I'm in the cricket match, I can look into this team and then I can look into this player. The team itself, so this team 1, doesn't really know that it's part of this cricket match, okay? And this player doesn't actually know which team it's from, okay? So it doesn't know which team it's from. The team doesn't know that it's part of the cricket match, but because we have main up here and we are looking down, we can work everything out. Okay, I can go team 1, player, and then get it because I can move down. Okay, I just can't move up, all right? So someone asked if this will be uploaded after the live stream. Yes, it will be. However, YouTube is a little bit random on how long it takes for it to upload. It might be an hour, it might be 4 hours, it might be a day. It never seems to be consistent. So that's just something that I'll let you know. Hopefully it's up quickly, okay? So someone was just asking if this is going to be on YouTube after. And it will be, but I don't know how long it takes to process. It's just a little random. All right. So if that makes sense, just write yes in the chat, or if you need me to clarify that. So with this, please use the chat. Makes it a lot easier because even just saying yes, it makes it so that I'm not talking to myself. Makes it easier for me. So you just say yes if that made sense. Cool. All right. So if this can stop scrolling. So what we're going to look at now is we've had a look at the search team already. We had a look at that in the lab, and it's very similar to the search player. So even if you weren't at the lab, we can clarify some things with the search player. So we're going to skip the add team for now, and we're going to go to the search player and have a look at how to implement that. So starting off, I would have given you a little bit of a template. Move that a little bit more. Myself a bit more room. All right. So I gave you a little bit of a template. It was private, player, search player, and then string player name and string player country. Let me just move this across for you. There's a bit more room to work with. All right, so we've got string player country. Now, if you were designing this yourself, it is important that we understand why we need both the player name and the player country. The reason for that is that if we go back to our definition of the teams and the players, the players can't have both the same name and country, but they could have the same name. So if we just search by name, we could possibly get multiple answers. So we need to search by both the name and country because that information is unique. Okay, so anyone that's done things like databases would know something similar like that as well. We want a unique solution here. Now, without knowing too much more here, we've already got a lot of information. Firstly, we know it's private. Now, for our case, because we're working in the cricket game for this problem, it doesn't actually matter if it's public or private because we're already at the top level and we already have access because we're in the cricket match. I just set it private so that you can see the difference. The other bits of information that are important is what's coming in and what's coming out. So whenever we see a method, we can think about it like this. Okay. So we've got a player name coming in. We've got a player country coming in. Okay. These are our parameters. These are what's coming in. And we get a player out. Okay. So this is the information coming into the method. This is the information coming out of the method. And we don't even need to read the code and we know this. Okay. And you can do this with any method. This is the information coming in. This is the information coming out. The only caveat to that is if you have printing happening inside where stuff is actually coming out while you're doing your method. But for us, we've designed it so all our printing is limited to the displays. So we don't have to worry about complex methods. Now, what happens inside of here is we search player. Okay, so all of this can be described by this little diagram here. So if you ever get stuck and you're unsure about what's the purpose of the method, you can draw out what's coming in, what's coming out, and then what's in the middle. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the player with the same name and country. Now, the only problem with this is that, remember, we've got this structure that looks something like this. Okay, so we don't actually have access to the players at the moment. We only have access to the teams, but through the teams, we can access the players. So here in my code, I can use team 1, I can use team 2, and that's perfectly fine, and I'm not going to get an error. But if I try and use player, it's going to say no symbol exists, and there is no player. Okay? Because it's all the way down here, and this cricket match can only see this here. So if I want to get a player, I need some access method to access it, which is called an accessor, and we have one of those. Okay, we have get player. So depending on the design, sometimes you don't want to give access to certain things, but here we do want to give access. So we have the get player, and it returns a player. So we can access this information that's buried deep down below. Stop moving. Okay, so we can access this information. And the way we do that is just by going team1.getPlayer. Okay, and this will give us a player. So I can do things like this now. I can write something like player A is team1.getPlayer. Okay, and that's perfectly legal because all I'm doing here is I'm setting up a temporary little object reference and making that connection. Okay, but we don't want that connection to be permanent. Okay, so what we do is we set up these little variables only between the braces, so they exist while we're doing some work. Okay, because we don't want to keep going through here, and then we get rid of it once we're done. And so what you'll notice is when you open up the template that I've given you, you'll have something called player temp player is null. Okay, this here is just an object reference that we're going to use for the time being. Okay. Now, we saw on Friday that, let's say this second one, there is no team. Okay. If I try and go team2.getPlayer, we get here, and there is no team2, it's null. So our program crashes and dies. Okay? So that's not going to work if we're trying to find our player. So we need to first check that the team exists. And we saw that we could check if the team exists by going team1 not equal to null. Okay? So we can do this with each of our teams and check if they exist, but we've also got another problem. What if the team exists, but the player doesn't? Okay. So we can check if the player exists by doing something like team1.getPlayer not equal to null. And that will check both the team1, that exists first, and then the player exists. Now the ordering is important, okay? You would obviously check this one first because you can't have a player without a team, and then this one second. Now this goes back to our short circuit evaluation. So we need to firstly check this. If that fails, we don't want to keep looking. So we can use an AND to do that. So let's have a look at that. So we can write something like if, now I'm going to put brackets here. I just like to separate this out a bit to make it clearer. So I can say if team1 not equal to null. So that first checks that this exists. I then use the AND so that it only looks at this next part if this is true. And the next part would be team1 dot get player not equal to null. Okay. Does that make sense so far? So just say yes if that makes sense so far. I can get rid of this now. Let's get some people away. Cool. All right. So the next thing we need to do is access this player name and player country from the player. Now, we first need to check that we've got some way to access it. So we need to see, firstly, that we've got two accesses, and secondly, that they're public. So we'll go over here, and we'll go to our player, and we have got the two accesses, okay, get player name and get country, and they are public. So they're the two things that we need to check if we're trying to get information. Have we got access to them, and is that access public? All right, so we can go back here, and we know that now. Now, I can't get the player's name from team 1 directly, but I can get it from the player. So I'm going to put an and here. Now, you could write this all on one line. I'm just going to put it on multiple lines because we run out of room otherwise. So what I can do is I can say team1 dot get player. Now, this here has evaluated to a player. That means I have access to all the player methods, sorry. So I can go dot get, what do we want? Name, a player name. I can't remember what I used here. Check. Yeah, I call it player name. Stop scrolling. Get player name. And this results into a string. So I can use string methods here. So I've got the player name from deep down below. And all I need to do now is compare it with this player name up here. So I can do that with the equals method. And I can just put player name here. Okay. From there, we also need to check the player's country. And if you can do the player's name, I think you can do the country quite easily. But this needs to be ANDed because we need both of them to be true. If we only needed one of them to be true, then we could use an OR. But we can use an AND here, and you can fill in the blanks here. Okay, so that'll do with the player country. Now, stop scrolling. Now, inside of this if statement, so I'll put the braces there, what we're going to do is we're going to actually get this player and store it in this temporary object reference so that we can return it at the end. Okay, and player comes team1 dot get player. Okay, so the reason I've done this is so that you don't have multiple returns. You have one return at the end, and if none of them get set, you just return null at the end. Okay. Now, we've done this for team 1, so you need to do this for team 2, team 3 as well. Okay. Team 2, team 3, and then at the end, you just return the temp player. And that's already there in the template. That's meant to be a semicolon. Okay. Now, does that make sense? Howdy. Does that make sense so far? So if that makes sense, just say yes, and we'll keep going. Cool, cool, cool. All right. So what we'll do is we'll go back here. So main's done, cricket match is done, run's done, display menu's done, process is done, and we've done the search team and we've done the search player. Okay, so now we can keep looking and we can have a look at this add player or add team. So out of both of those there, the add team's probably the easier one. So we'll start with the add team, and then we can go have a look at some of these other ones, such as the displays. So what I might do is I'll grab that add team. Let's find something clean to put it. Let's go down the end here. All right. So here I've given you a lot of steps, but what we need to realize here is that this method is a little bit more confusing, is because we don't have anything coming in and we don't have anything coming out, but we're adding a team. So there is actually stuff coming in, but it's not coming in through parameters. It's coming in through the keyboard. Okay. And we don't have anything coming out because we're creating the team inside of the method, the method itself. Okay. So add team relies on the keyboard, not on some parameter coming in. All right, the method creates a new team instance where the attributes passed to the constructor are based on the user input. So if we're going to do user input, we know we need system.out.print, and we need our keyboard. Now the keyboard scanner is already created for you, so you don't need to create it. You only need one. If you've got 10,000 scanners, you're doing something wrong. All right, the method should check if all teams are already added. Now there's actually two ways to do this, but you know that it's going to be an if statement. Okay. Now there's if they're already added, then all of them will be not null. Okay. So they're all going to be not null. So what you could do is you could check if they're all not null and then deal with that. Okay, so lots of ands. Okay. The other way you could do it is you could check if they're all null, if at least one of them is null, and then do the opposite. But we'll do it this way. Okay. Now, we're going to print some message here. I think it's something like maximum teams. Yeah, it's maximum teams for each. Okay. So it's a print. And you'll notice that I don't put a return in here. I just use an else. Okay, we want to maintain one return point at the end. Okay, so I don't need to have multiple returns. I just let it return naturally at the end of the method. Okay, I'm not going to write the top of the method. Now, inside of that, the method should ask the team's name as shown in the example output. Now, one thing here is that it needs to be on the same line. So just check the example and make sure yours matches. So ask user for name. And then the name's a string, so just store in a string. Okay, and I'm going to call that variable team name. Okay, I'm going to keep it consistent throughout. Okay, so I'm going to call that variable team name. Now you know how to do this. I'm not going to give that to you. Now, the method should check using the search team method if there is already a team with the same name. So the great thing here is that we've already written the search team method, and that can return four things, sorry. So the search team, in our example, could return three things. It could return null. Sorry, I keep saying three. It could return null. It could return the address of team 1. It could return the address of team 2, or it could return the address of team 3. Now we want to check, using the search team method, if there's already a team with the same name. So what we really want is to check that search team returns null, because if we can't find it, then it's null, and it means that there is no team with the same name. So for example, if I entered team B and there was already a B, then search team would return something that's not null. Okay, because it'll return either one of these, whichever one has the team name B. So what we can do is we can just put this directly inside of an if statement. You can, if you really want, you can store it into a variable and then compare it if it makes you feel more comfortable. But you can have calls to methods inside of your if statements. So I'm going to say search team. I'm going to search based on this team name, and I just want to check that it's null. Okay, if it's null, then there isn't a team with the same name, so it's all good. And I continue writing my code here. Else, I'm going to print another message, which I think is, what is it? Print team already exists. Okay, now you'll notice, let me just get a bit more room. You'll notice that it says and return. We don't actually need to explicitly put the return there. We just let it naturally return because it'll drop from there, and then naturally return at the end. Okay, so we don't need a return in there. All right. So now we've got this if statement here, and all we want to do is then the appropriate team constructor is called. Now, at the reason it says appropriate is because at the moment, oh, quite far away, there is only one team constructor. However, in the assignment D, there's two constructors. Okay, and so you're going to have to choose which one's appropriate to use in what circumstance. Okay, because you remember back to the lectures, we can have multiple constructors. In this one, we only have one, so the appropriate one is the only one that's there. So it's kind of easy. All right. Now, looking at that constructor, we only have one argument, so we just need to give it the team name, and we already have the team name, so that makes it nice and easy. All right. So what I've got here is if all three teams are not added, then team 1 should be used. Now, there's multiple ways you could do this, okay? But the most simplest way would be if not all of them are added, then basically what's it called? Sorry, if not all are added, then basically team 1 should be null, okay? Because they're all null. So I only need to check team 1 because remembering the order that they get added in, you can check them all if you really want, but we can just check, is team 1 null? If team 1's null, then we can construct it. So we can do team 1. Now, we're calling a constructor, so we need to use the new keyword, okay, like you have with Scanner, like you have in the labs with your own classes. Team, we're calling a constructor, so it has the same name as the class, and then we just pass in a team name. Okay, and then as we've talked about in the lab on Friday, because we're not using arrays yet, there's going to be a lot of repetition, and so there's going to be a lot of repetition here as well, and you'll need to do the same thing. Team 2, team 3. All right, does that make sense in terms of the add team method? Just say yes if it makes sense. So anyone that started late, just a bit of communication, just so that I know that you're up to where I am, because there is a delay also. All right, so what have we got? All right, so that's our add team. Now, we can have a look at our, what should we have a look at next? Let's have a look at remove team, because it's a nice small one. I'll put that. Remove team, there it is. Okay. So this is an interesting one, and it's a good one conceptually to what's happening. So going back to our structure that we had before, so this is our cricket match. We have our team 1, our team 2, our team 3, our players, etc. Now, remembering that cricket match is storing 3 memory addresses, okay? So let's say that this team is at memory address 84, okay? Now, if I lose that number, okay, either intentionally or unintentionally, which you can do, you can accidentally override it. If you lose that 84, basically this here, yes, you still created it, and yes, it's still in memory, but because you have no reference to it, you are never going to be able to find it again. And so it's considered deleted or gone, okay? Now, basically, memory will only stay and retain if it's got something referenced to it. So it means that the computer will, because nobody's storing its memory address in this program, it will actually go and say that this memory's all right to write over. So once you get rid of this reference here, this data here, even though you created it and it's perfectly fine at that point, as soon as you don't have a reference to it, it's invalid data. It's pretty much corrupted. Okay, so by taking out that link, and wherever we take the link out, if we don't have another link, that's as good as gone. Okay, now one thing I just will show you, if I created a temporary variable or object reference, and I put a link to here, okay, and I deleted this one here, then this bottom player still exists whilst there is this link. Okay, so if there is some link, then it will exist. As soon as you break that link, you can't get that memory back. It's gone, right? And this is a good thing because it means that we don't have to manually go and fix up memory and change and set memory to say that it's fine to not use anymore. Okay, so the way we do this is just by setting the reference to null. So this method should remove, okay, and you can see next to it I put in brackets set object reference to null. The last team loaded. If no teams have been loaded, then the program should print no team to remove. Now we remember that team 1 needs to be added first, team 2 needs to be added second, team 3 needs to be added third. So the best thing would be to check, firstly, has team 3 been added? If so, delete it. If it hasn't been added, then we check team 2, else we check team 1, else we print out a message saying no team to remove. So this is a clear need for if, else if structure. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. You know what goes down there. And all we need to check is because we're going in that order, we can just say something like if team 3 is not equal to null, okay, so it exists, then team 3 becomes null. And by doing that, we get rid of that link and it gets rid of it completely. Okay, so just by setting something to null and making sure that there is no reference to it, it's effectively deleted it. Okay, and this is quite powerful because it means that all you need to do is just not have that address and it's gone. Okay, this doesn't have a postman equivalent because that would be scary. All right, does that make sense? So I'm just going to have a 2-minute break. Oh, probably even a minute. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. All right, so is everyone up to where we're up to right now? Or is there any questions so far? So we can tick off remove team, add player, and displays. So what we'll have a look at now is, let's go have a look at the display team. I think, yeah, the display team is very similar to the display player. So but they're practically the same. So we'll have a look at display team. That's that one there. Done that. Running out of room. Right. What I'll do is I'll grab this display team. All right, so we're going to look at display team. Oops. I'll just move it down here so I've got a bit of space. All right. So display team's quite good because it allows us to test if things are working. And it's a major part of this assignment in terms of the execution, because if we can't see it, then we don't know if it's working or not. So you need to make sure that this gets done. And you can do it earlier rather than later if you like. Now, this takes advantage of your toString method. And this is something that you should kind of understand. Generally, we wouldn't use the toString method here for a more professional application. ToString's more for programmers, is we're written in a language that's a little bit more program savvy. And if we were printing this out to a proper user, we'd put it in a nice little interface and make it look nice. But we're keeping it simple here. And so we're going to use the toString. So the method should check that there is at least one team to display. Okay, so basically here, once again, we're going to use an if statement. Okay, and an else. Now the if statement is just asking if all of them are null. Okay, if all are null, then just print out a message, no teams exist. Okay. Then from there, the user should be asked to enter the team name. So ask user to enter team name. Okay, just a print. And then we're going to get the team name. Okay, now team name's a string, so we'll store it in a string. So we'll get team name and store in a string. Now, the great thing here is that we have a search team method already, so we can go and search if that team exists. Now, with this, compared to the previous method where we were adding teams, we actually need the team to get its methods. So we're going to set up a temporary team. Okay. And I'll explain why. So remember that we've got this structure, and I keep going back to this structure. Okay. And we've got that here. Okay. Now, what happens when we call search team is it returns one of these three addresses or null. So if it returns this address here, we can get all the information here, but I don't know that it's team 3, okay? Because this here doesn't give me any information, and if I read the information in there, it gives me the team name, but it doesn't give me the variable name or the object references name. So I don't know that it's talking about team 3. Now, you could, if you really wanted to, do an if statement and compare that memory address with that memory address and find out which team it is, but we don't need to do that. We can just use the temp team and then grab the information from within here. Okay, because this here doesn't matter which one it is. So we're going to grab the temp team, and what we'll do is we're going to search for the team based on the team name. So we can do something like search team, and we can go team name. Okay. From there, we can do an if statement and ask, does the team exist? Okay, and I think you know how to check that now using nulls and not nulls. I won't tell you which one. So if the team does exist, then we're going to print out the toString. So we can just do something like system.out.println team.toString. Now, there is one thing that we can do slightly better here. When you write inside of a print or anywhere that you use a string, if you write team by itself in here, that will automatically call the toString. Okay, so when you put team, oh, sorry, it should be temp team, sorry. Temp team. When you put just the name of the object, did it wrong again. Temp team. When you just write the name of the object reference, it will call the toString. Okay, that's just a little shortcut. If you don't want to do that, you can put the toString there, and that's perfectly fine. But that is one little shortcut that you can use if you want. So that will automatically call the toString. And that is the reason that we need to make sure that we spell toString exactly correctly, or else it will actually call another method. Okay, and that goes without overriding methods. All right. Does that make sense? So as I said, you can if you want. So if that makes sense, just put yes in the chat. If you got a question, raise your question. But yeah, you can either write temp team or temp team.toString. They both do the same thing. Yes, no, maybe. Scared some people away. All right. Let's go back up, see what we've done. So we've done the display team. So what have we got left? We've got display player. I said that's very similar. I think, unless you have any questions about it, that one there, I think you can work out yourself. The add player is very similar, but there is one thing that I want to show you in the add player. So let's, because it's a little bit more complex, the add player. Add player, there it is. We got room up the top. Yeah, we do. We'll do. Grab that. I'll move the add player up the top here. We'll just have a quick look at some of it. I won't repeat the stuff that we did in the add team. I think you're aware of it. There is a couple of extra stuff in add player that we should be aware of. All right. So add player is very similar to add team. We don't accept anything and we don't return anything. The first thing we should check is that there is at least one team to add players to. Now, we've done this with our displays. We've done this multiple times already, so I think you're pretty comfortable with step one. The user is then prompted to enter the player's name and the player's country. The next step is that if a player with the same name and country already exists, an appropriate message should be returned. So this is going to be our search player method, okay? And if it returns not null, then that player already exists. The user is then prompted to enter the team name. Okay, we know how to do that. If the team does not exist, then the appropriate message. So this is our search team, but this time we're looking for, if it's null, then we print a message saying it couldn't be found. And if it's not null, that's a good thing. Now, this here has to be stored. Okay? This has to be stored because we're going to need to use methods later. So like we did with our display, we're going to need team, temp team, search team, team name. Okay, we have to store it because we'll need it later. Okay, now, and then you can use temp team in the if statement to check if it does or doesn't exist. Okay, so if temp team is not equal to null, okay, that means it exists. So we can do the next part. The player is prompted to enter the batting skill. Okay, so that's a value between 0 and 1. Make sure that you use a double there. That says it there. Of course it does. A number double between 0 and 1. If the user enters an invalid value, the user is prompted until they enter a valid value. So this is just a simple loop, probably a while loop or a do while loop. You can do it with either, depending on your implementation. Okay, so that's just a loop. This is the part that I think most people get confused about, and this is the part I want to mention. So, oh no, there's one other part that I want to mention as well. So this is a problem that happened with the last assignment as well. Because we're getting a next double, make sure after you get this next double, just put a keyboard dot next line just to capture the enter key. And that can be after the loop. It actually can be right after the loop would probably be a suitable place for that. Just because you're using next double, it doesn't capture the next line, which is the enter key. And what you'll find is that the enter choice from the menu requires an int. So you might need to do that. Okay, so just because there's doubles there, you might need to do that. Now, this part here is important. There's a couple of ways we could have implemented the add player method inside of the team. Now, we've gone with this here. Both of them would be perfectly fine. So we've gone with void add player, and then we've got player. Okay. The alternative way we could have written this is void add player string name, string country, and string double batting skill. Now, the difference between these two is that the add player, where we pass this information in, we would have just made it the responsibility of the team to construct the player. Okay, so inside of get player, it would have had player becomes new player, blah, 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 and using the arguments. But instead, we actually pass the full player already constructed. So it's actually the cricket match's responsibility to create the player. Now, it's up to you which one you would go to, depending on the situation in your own problems. We've gone with this one because it's a little easier, especially for the next part of the assignment. But both of these would work, especially for this assignment. Both of these would be perfectly fine. So blah, 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 blah. I think we're up to it. All right. So we need to construct this inside. So we've done our looping. Okay. So we've got our batting skill, we've got our player name, we've got our player country, we've got pretty much everything we need. Up there. I'll move that down. So we've done our looping where we've got, so that's number 6. And now what we want to do is we want to call the appropriate player constructor, and then a new player is instantiated. This object reference is passed to the team using the add player method from the team class. Now that's a lot to take in. So what we're doing here is, I'm going to do this the slow way. There is a quicker way to do this, but I think this will make a bit more sense. So I'm going to create a temp player. And I need to call the player's constructor, and a new player is constructed. So new player. And inside of here, I'm going to have the name, country, and batting skill. Obviously, if I was writing this in code, I'd have proper variable names. I'm just doing that because I've run out of room. And then I've got my temp team, so I can do something like temp team dot add player, and then I can pass that in. Okay, now have a look at what this looks like. I really want some blue. Let me move this. All right. So I want to have a look at what's actually happening here, because it's actually quite powerful. So once again, I'm going to draw the same diagram I've drawn 10,000 times. If I can draw. Right. So we have this cricket match. We have team. Let's say we have 2 teams so far. The third team hasn't been added. Okay. And let's call this team A. Let's call this team B. And both of them don't have a player at the moment. So I go into this search team and try and find team B, let's say. So this object reference is temp team, and that's going to have this connection here. Okay. I then also create a new player. Okay, and I'm going to call that temp player. So that creates a temporary player. Okay. Now, what you'll notice at this stage right now is that neither of the teams are connected to this player. We've got all these other extra connections happening. Okay. And it can be confusing when we've got all these other connections. And what we want to do is make that connection here and get rid of these two connections because they're not needed. So what we do is we add the player, and then player takes, so we're passing to B, okay, we've got temp team, we give it this object reference. So we're giving it this object reference. It then stores this object reference, creating this link here. Okay, and then when the method's done, that's gone, that's gone, that's gone. And what have we got? We've got the structure that we want. Team B has a new player. Okay. Yes, that might be confusing, but if you understand that and you can draw the diagrams for that, you'll understand object-oriented programming really, really well. Okay. And it really helps. Okay, that's basically what we're doing there. All right, does that make sense? Or is there any questions? So that's add player. All right. The last one is display all teams. This one's fairly easy. I don't think many people should have problems with it. Display all teams. So last one we care about is display all teams. The only difficult part here is pretty much the ordering. The method should print all team information using toString of all the teams that are added. Each team should be printed on a separate line in the order 1, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, depending on if the numbers are added. So really, what we're doing is we need to check firstly if team 3 exists, and if it does, then we print team 1, team 2, team 3. Then if that's not true, so we've got an else, if we check team 2 and we print 1, 2, in the last case we just print team 1. So that's all the basics of all the methods. The match I'm not going to describe. That's a challenge for you, and hopefully some of the students get it. If you do get it, make sure you keep it to yourself. I really want to see who can actually solve it. Is there any further questions or problems or issues? Oops. I think everyone seems fairly satisfied with that. So finishing off then, there will be questions like last time about certain methods. and what they do. So you will need to describe all of your methods. So make sure you do understand what each method does. What I've tried to do is try to explain them in terms of just the raw code, but also what it's doing. You need to try and be able to explain it like that too, okay, for the real time. And also don't forget your indentation, your variable names, your camel case will still be marked again. That's really important. So what I might do, I will leave this on for 5 minutes and just write your questions. If there are no questions after 5 minutes, then we'll finish up there. All right. Thank you if you are leaving. All right, so I'll leave this for 5 minutes. If there's questions, I might just step away for a minute or two, and I'll come back and have a look at the chat and see if there's any questions. It doesn't have to be about the assignment as well. If you've got other questions. If you've got questions about the exam or anything like that, feel free to ask them now. I'm free. All right. So put your questions in the chat. I'm just going to take a quick break and then I'll answer any questions and yeah, finish up there. We'll keep going. All right. I think there's not going to be any more questions. All right. Thank you very much. Good luck. And I might see some of you on Monday. What's this? All right. That's it.